Hello, everyone, and welcome back. So, where we ended, I'm sorry my screen was kind of being silly. I don't know what was going on there. But we are back on page 154. We only ended about one or two pages early. So, what we've got for today, they have just refueled. They have all of these supplies. Patricia knows that Neil has done this before and has done it well. They're a little bit concerned because there is someone that was brought on board, Dr. Pavlov, and they're like, who is he? Why was he brought on board? I was thinking it was going to be Benjamin Bender. I've read this book a few times, but it's been a while. I usually only read it once a year because I don't want to reread it to my intervention over and over. I'm sure you wouldn't want to hear me read this like twice within a year, so it's been a little bit. So it's Dr. Pavlov, not Benjamin Bender, like I was thinking it might be. And let's see what's going to happen. We know Jack and Joanne are setting up preparations to maybe break themselves out, so let's find out. So if we go back just a little, let's see, everyone on the jet except for Sam doubted this and wondered why Dr. Pavlov had been brought on board, but there's no time to discuss it. You're all fueled up, Captain Winters said. Oh, one other thing. He handed Neil a plastic mailing tube. What's this? I don't know. It was with the supplies, Captain Winters gave him a salute and closed the door to the Learjet. Neil opened the tube. Inside was a complete set of plans for the Asnar vineyards and satellite photos of the property dated the day before. This will be very helpful, he said, looking at Sam. More than you think, Sam said, taking the satellite images. What's your next move? Smitty asked. We fly to Santiago, Chile, Sam said, and then on to the vineyard. Neil frowned. Why not just go straight to the vineyard? Because they're not expecting us until early this evening. Expecting us? Neil shouted. Sam ignored the outburst and turned to Patricia. What size jeans do you wear? He asked. Chapter 29. El Sereno arrived in Atlanta by private jet, 2.5 hours before Marshals Doris Welty and Don Smythe. By the time he got there, he knew the hotel room they would be staying in. He reserved the room directly above theirs and got settled in as his surveillance crew installed miniature cameras and sophisticated listening devices in the Marshals' double suite. Just as the sun was coming up, he watched the thoroughly exhausted Marshals come into the room and drop their bags. Don barely had time to loosen his tie and remove his suit jacket before there was a knock on the door. Doris looked through the peephole, then opened the door, letting in a man and woman resembling Neil and Patricia Osborne. Is that them? One of his crew asked. El Sereno shook his head no and emailed Alonzo. As he waited for Alonzo's reply, his cell phone rang. On the other end was a voice from his past, a voice he never thought he'd hear again. The man on the other end said his name was Sam Sebastian, but El Sereno knew by another name. Can they trust Sam? We're going to have to find out what's going on here, guys. Page 158. 30. Well, chapter 30, page 158. Zita Vega was looking forward to this morning's photo session. She did not like the boy and thought Raphael had been too lenient with him the day before. Today, he would get a proper meeting, one that would convince Neil Osborne to turn the diary over to them. 3 stablemen were in the barn when she came in. She shouted for them to leave. The men obeyed without hesitation, leaving their pitchforks standing in the stalls they were mucking out. She slammed the door behind them and strode over to Diablo's stall. Even he sensed that today was not a good day to resist the woman with the strange eyes. He stood perfectly still, sweating, as she jerked a halter over his ears and tied him to the post in the stall. He jumped at the sound of the secret door opening and looked back, relieved to see the woman disappearing into the darkness. Zita glanced at her watch. 5 after 7. Her plan was to handcuff both of them, then beat the boy in front of his sister. When she opened the door, she saw that Joanne was alone on the sofa. She didn't need one, but now Zita had a very good reason to beat the boy. She had told them to be ready. Where is he? He's taking a shower, Joanne said, clearly frightened. He'll be out any minute. He'll be out in 5 seconds, Zita thought as she jerked the girl's arms behind her back, snapping on a pair of cuffs as tight as they would go. The bathroom door was closed and she could hear the shower on the other side. If the boy had locked the door, she would kill him, she decided. Alonzo wouldn't like it, but they still had the girl, and the plan was to eventually kill them both anyways. The door was unlocked and she felt a tinge of disappointment as she pulled it open. She strode over to the shower stall and jerked the door open. It was empty. Jack ran out of the bedroom, where he'd been hiding, and slammed the bathroom door behind Snake Eyes. A second later, she hit the other side of the door like a wrecking ball, jarring every bone in his body. "Get the board I cut," he shouted to Joanne. "We have to wedge the door closed." "I can't." He glanced back at her and swore, and then saw her hands were cuffed behind her. "Help me lean against it." Joanne ran over and put her shoulder against the door. Jack pulled the hammer and screwdriver from under his belt. Bam! Snake Eyes hit the door again with an enraged scream. The door moved, but they were able to keep it closed. Jack wedged the screwdriver between the door and the jamb and hit it with the hammer a second before Snake Eyes made her third run. The door did not move as much as it had the second time. He gave the screwdriver another whack, then pulled the shims out of his pocket and started hammering them in. With each one, the door became more solid. Either that or Snake Eyes was losing her strength. Jack told Joanne to keep leaning against the door while he got the board he had hidden under the sofa. He wedged one end underneath the doorknob and put the other end against the board he nailed to the floor. "I hope that holds her," he says. "I hope so too," Joanne said. "What about these?" She turned around and showed him the handcuffs. Jack retrieved the keyring Snake Eyes left dangling on the front door. On it was a small handcuff key. He unlocked Joanne's cuffs. Snake Eyes was still yelling and pounding on the door. Jack prayed that the bunker was as soundproof as it appeared to be, and that the two-way radio she was carrying didn't work underground. "How long do you think we have?" Joanne asked, rubbing the feeling back into her arms. "Until someone comes down here and sets her free. They'll have to use a chisel to get the shims out. It'll take them a while." What Jack didn't know was how long it would be before Snake Eyes was missed. He went into the bedroom, got his pack, which he had stuffed with food, water, and other things he thought they might need. "Ready?" "I guess," Joanne answered uncertainly. They stepped through the doorway, and Jack was about to lock the door behind him, but hesitated. "Hang on." He went inside and got the hammer. "Now what are you doing?" Instead of answering, he locked the door, then hit the key with the hammer, breaking it off in the lock. That ought to slow him down. He put the other keys in his pocket. As Joanne and Jack made their way up the stairs to the secret door, Alonzo, Asnar, paced his small cell like a circus cat waiting to be led into the ring. The Osborns were not in Atlanta, although the marshals wanted it to appear they were. El Sereno had been able to trace them as far as the Dallas-Fort Worth airport, but from there it was a dead end. The watcher was still monitoring the marshals in their suite, but so far had yielded nothing. But the thing that really infuriated Alonzo was the 3 emails he sent to Neil demanding to know where he had gone unanswered. This kind of disrespect could not be tolerated. Neil would be taught a lesson he would never forget. Alonzo typed a simple message to his brother on his handheld. "Kill the boy now." A moment after he sent it, one of the inmates he had hired stopped by his cell. "What do you want?" "Just checking in on you," the inmate said. "You haven't been down to the cafeteria for 2 days." "So?" "Thought you may be hungry." He held up a Burger King bag. Alonzo was suspicious. "Where'd you get it?" "One of the guards," the inmate said. "He stops on his way in and picks it up. Charges twice what it costs, but it's better than the slop they serve here. If you're not interested, it's no sweat off my back. I'll eat it myself." "Leave it," Alonzo said. Jack led the way up the stairs, hoping the barn would be deserted like it'd been the day before. It was, except for Diablo, who nearly kicked Jack's head off when he stepped through the secret door. The huge hoofs missed him by an inch. He fell backward, knocking Joanne down the stairs and landing on top of her. "What do you think you're doing?" Joanne shrieked. "Quiet," Jack hissed. "There might be people in the barn. The satanic stallion took a swipe at me." They entangled themselves. "How are we going to get by him?" Joanne whispered. "I don't know, but we have to do it quick." Jack crept back up the stairs to look the situation over. From his vantage point, a couple of steps from the top, the stallion looked like the size of a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Diablo turned his gigantic head and gave Jack a wide-eyed glare to say, "There's a lot more where that came from. Come on up." Jack knew virtually nothing about horses. All he knew is that he and Joanne had to get out of the barn now. He took the pack off and tossed it down the stairs to Joanne. "Don't come up until I give you the okay," he said. "What are you?" Jack rushed the stallion. Think he was either going to get past the beast or his head was going to be the next thing to fly down the stairs. He wasn't exactly sure what happened next, but whatever it was, it hurt. He flew through the air and hit the ground like a bag of rocks, expecting to be trampled to death, but the hoofs never came. When he opened his eyes, he saw that he was lying on his back in the aisle, with Diablo safely behind the stall door. The wind was knocked out of him, but nothing seemed to be broken. Slowly, he got to his feet, greatly relieved to see he was still in one piece and that no one was in the barn to witness his flying act. "Jack?" Joanne called fretfully. He walked over to the stall. I'm fine. Stay where you are while I figure out how to get this monster out of the way. That job turned out to be relatively easy. He simply untied the halter rope and swung the door open. Diablo shot out of the stall like a cannonball, snorting and bucking to the far end of the barn. It's clear, Jack said. Joanne came up carrying the pack. Jack closed the secret door behind her. Which way? Joanne asked. Jack looked towards Diablo, who was still bucking and chipping wood from the walls with his hoofs. Not that way. He took the pack from her and led her to the opposite door. As he reached from the knob, it started to turn from outside. He grabbed Joanne and pulled her behind the door just as it banged open. 3 men came running through, shouting in Spanish. At first he thought they were after them, but it quickly became clear that Diablo was the object of their panic. One of them grabbed a lariat from a hook, and the 3 of them cautiously advanced towards Diablo, completely unaware of the 2 fugitives hiding behind him. Jack waited until Diablo had their full attention, which did not take long. Diablo was enjoying his freedom and was fully prepared to fight the 3 men to keep it. When the battle started, Jack and Joanne ran out of the barn and were nearly blinded by the bright morning sun after spending nearly 24 hours underground. Joanne came to her senses first and pulled Jack around the corner of the barn, where they hid behind a bush near a fence padlock. Now what? She asked. Jack couldn't answer right away. He was still a little stunned over the fact that they had gotten as far as they had. 2 more men ran by. One of them was shouting something in Spanish to the handheld radio, and like Raphael, he was decked out from head to toe like a cowboy, with a pair of 6-shooters holstered around his waist. Jack hoped he wasn't talking to Snake Eyes. Run or hide, Jack finally answered. Those are our only 2 choices. He was leaning towards hiding. They wouldn't get very far if they ran. He figured it would take an hour or so for the men to get through the bunker after they discovered Snake Eyes was missing. The other problem was that it was broad daylight. It would have been better to spring the trap at night, but Jack had the feeling that if he'd waited until then, it would have been too late. Run or hide where? Joanne asked. Jack didn't know, but they couldn't stay where they were. Another cowboy ran past, but didn't see them. There were several buildings on their side of the barn, which he hadn't seen when they arrived. On a hill above them was a huge house overlooking the lake they had flown over. Beneath it along the shore was a strange sight. A town, right out of the Old West, with clapboard saloon stores, hotels, a blacksmith shop. There was even a church. A horse-drawn supply wagon was bouncing down the dusty block-long street, and there were several horses tied to it, hitching posts outside the buildings. You think they have a marshal? Jack whispered. Joanne stared at the town. I suppose with their kind of money, the Asnars can indulge any fantasy or build what they want. And no, I don't think they have a marshal. How far is Mendoza from here? 50 miles, Jack said. Maybe a little more. I vote for finding a place to hide. I don't think they'll expect us to hang around, and we have a better chance getting out of here after dark. Okay. They ran to the nearest building and tried the door. It was locked. Try one of the keys, Joanne said. Jack fished him out and on the 4th try found the right one. He opened the door cautiously and looked inside. The lights were off and no one seemed to be around. He pulled Joanne through the door and locked it behind him. At first glance, it looked like some kind of storage building. Hundreds of oak wine barrels were stacked 7 or 8 high along the walls, and pallets of oak planks covered the floor. Just above the barrels was a row of dirty windows, letting in just enough light for them to see. It's a barrel factory, Jack said, walking over to a long workbench to look at the tools. Files, mallets, chisels, saws, and metal cutters were not going to help him. He went over to the barrels and discovered they were all empty and easy to move. I guess we'll have to make ourselves a little cubbyhole and hide in it until dark. What about mice? Joanne asked. What about Raphael? It was a mean thing to say, but it had the desired effect. She started to help him rearrange the barrels. After 10 minutes, they had a nice hiding spot hollowed out. Jack crawled in first, and Joanne joined him after he reassured her there were no mice. At least that he could see. How did you get by Diablo? She asked him. He either bucked or kicked me out of the stall. I'm not sure which. Well, it was impressive. It was desperate, Jack corrected. Chapter 34. Raphael Asnar did not wake up until 11, which was relatively early for him. But he had a lot to do. The jamboree was tonight. 35 people were flying into the vineyard for the annual cartel meeting to be held at Durango, the Old West town he had personally designed and built. authentic, from the tar on the roofs to the brass spittoons beneath the saloon bars. He stepped out onto the bedroom balcony with a cup of black coffee. Looking down on Durango, preparations for the jamboree were well underway, with supplies being brought in by horse-drawn wagons and hand carts. Motorized vehicles were not allowed in the town, nor were electricity, phones, two-way radios, automatic weapons, synthetic clothing, or anything else that did not exist in 1871. Raphael smiled, remembering their first jamboree several years ago. The guests were not pleased when his men confiscated their weapons and cell phones and made them change into Western attire, but their protest quickly passed after they stepped back in time in Durango. The following year, everyone showed up wearing the proper clothes, carrying Colt revolvers, Winchester repeaters, and Bowie knives. But this year's jamboree would be different from the past years. For the first time, Alonzo would not be here. The brothers had discussed canceling, or at least delaying it until Alonzo's release. But if they did either, the members of the cartel would become more frantic than they already were. Each day Alonzo remained in jail, it became increasingly difficult to keep everyone in line. Some were threatening to start their own operations, and Raphael's job tonight was to stop that in its tracks. With the Osborne brats locked up beneath a barn, Alonzo's release was assured. The face-to-face meetings took place in a back room of one of the saloons. Members of the cartels were brought in, individually or in small groups, and were told what was expected of them in the coming year. Alonzo had stayed in business by completely compartmentalizing the cartel. Each member knew only their piece of the puzzle. If they were arrested, they could tell the authorities only about their small part of the overall picture. This is why Neil Osborne's diaries was so important. Somehow, the pilot had managed to gather all the pieces and put them together. Raphael checked his notes. He had written down on little cards exactly what Alonzo wanted him to tell each cartel member. He hoped it would take too long so he could enjoy the party himself. And we will end there for today. Join me back next time. How is this going to work out? Are they going to get there in time? Why is Sam talking to El Sereno? Will the kids come out alive? Got a lot left to see.